Welcome into this week's episode of Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we are back to talk all things college basketball. Here in the first segment, we're going to take you through the Champions Classic. What happened first? We saw Kansas take on Michigan State, an ugly offensive game pretty much throughout. We'll break down both sides, what we were able to find out about those two teams. And then the nightcap later on, we got Duke against Kentucky. The Wildcats pull it out, the first big win of the Mark Pope era. What does it mean for Kentucky? What have we learned? Took a question earlier this week about whether Kentucky was a contender or pretender. Have my thoughts changed at all on that? Also, we'll get into Cooper Flagg, what we saw from him, good and bad, in that debut here in the first segment. Then we'll take a break. We'll come back, and we have to talk about Ryan Kalkbrenner at Creighton because what he is doing is nothing short of spectacular. Last week, did not end up getting to his performance, his 49-point performance with two missed shots on the show. Unfortunately, due to a travel conflict or scheduling, just having to work around things, I was recording on Wednesday night, some point right around halftime of that Creighton game, so did not have it pulled up in front of me, could not cite any final scores, and so we could not have that discussion yet this time last week. But now here we are. He's played two more games since then, both performances about as efficient as you can be. This is a guy who was already in the running for an All-American spot. I'll tell you why I think that he is probably right now the clear front runner for the Player of the Year. And then, as always, we will send you out of here in the third segment with the games of the week, taking you through everything you need to keep an eye on across college basketball over the next 7 days. So let's go ahead and get into it. This first game that we're going to break down, Kansas against Michigan State. For Kansas, it was a big night for Hunter Dickinson. Good to see him come out and put together a 40-minute performance because not only at the start of this year, but last year at the end, throughout in big games over the course of the last couple of years. And really, if you go back kind of throughout his full college career, Michigan and Kansas, there's been this narrative that while he does show up big, he's no doubt one of the best players in college basketball. He's really built for it at his size and the way that he plays the game. His ability to close games has come into question at different points throughout his career. Certain matchups have given him trouble. Michigan State clearly not one of those because he goes out and puts up a double-double, and really down the stretch, he was an anchor for this Kansas team, helped them hold it together as they struggled. He was really the offense in the first half. The second half, he got more contribution from his teammates, of course, but he still was that go-to steady option that he needs to be if Kansas is going to be the real Final Four contender that everyone knows that they can be at the end of this season. So, good night for Hunter Dickinson. Bad night for offense in general, outside of him, though. Kansas struggled with their shot from the perimeter. Just not as a team quite there yet, which is understandable. They've got a lot of new pieces. They're fitting together. There's guys on this team that have offensive firepower. AJ Storr, we've seen. David Coit, although it was at a lower level, we've seen have offensive output. Rylan Griffin at Alabama was a guy who you could rely on for that perimeter, that floor spacing kind of guy on the offensive end of the floor. And then KJ Adams has not really found his game. DeJuan Harris either to this point, at least in this game against Michigan State. They struggled a little bit more than you would expect from some veteran guys. But Michigan State, I thought, had a bigger takeaway than Kansas here. Because Kansas, yes, they're undefeated. They're number one in the country. They kind of reaffirm that position, that they're a really good basketball team. But Michigan State, I thought, had a real chance here. Ranked outside the top 25, something that's not common in the Tom Izzo era. A team that they dipped into the transfer portal for Fiddler and excuse me, dealing with a little cold here, but they dipped into the transfer portal, but they didn't go big game hunting like the Kansases, the Alabamas, these teams that are at the top of the standings. They went and filled out roles, and Frankie Fiddler, he filled out a role in this game. Although the offense was not really there, the perimeter shot was not really there. Jaden Akins really struggled. I was surprised by how much he struggled from start to finish. He could not get the offense going, and for Michigan State, he has to get the offense going. He is sort of the engine here, and that's what you're going to deal with if you're not going to dip in for that big star player in the portal. Somebody on the team has to take on that responsibility. Akins is the best equipped to do that, because you look at the rest of the lineup, and while I like Cohen Carr, I really like what Jace Richardson can become. I like I like Fears at point guard. I just don't know if any of those guys you can trust to be the number one option right now. I think Richardson is probably your best bet as the season goes on to take on a role similar to that, but he's not there yet. He's a freshman. He's a couple games into his college career. Understandable that he's not yet ready to be the go-to guy on a team that's playing against the number one team in the country. And while some people, I'm sure, will say, look, they kept it close, they were in this game, that's a win for Michigan State. I don't think that's the case, because the things that held them back from winning against a Kansas team that had struggles are all the things that make this Michigan State team weak. There wasn't really anything overly surprising, unless you want to say Jaden Akins, poor night offensively was a big surprise. But even then, you got a big night from Trey Holloman off the bench. So it's the big rotation. And that's going to kill Michigan State all year round, because they have to play in the Big Ten, where there's no shortage of big men. And we know that big men kind of run college basketball now with their ability to stay longer. These older veteran bigs, Xavier Booker just has not cut it to this point. Jackson Kohler, there's just not enough on that interior, I don't think, to really push this Michigan State team. I don't think they can hold the best bigs in the country on the defensive end, and I don't think on the offensive end, any of them offer you that much particularly. It's just a position of weakness for the Spartans, and one that I don't see many paths to resolving at this point. So Tom Izzo, I'm sure he will work in different ways, try to figure it out, but I don't see it from that front court to be able to turn this into a top 10 sort of team, which is what you're really expecting from Tom Izzo throughout the course of his career. Now, not every year, sure, but I don't see it this year for Tom Izzo and this Michigan State team. I think that they still are a NCAA tournament team to me right now, but you could tell me it went the wrong way, and I would believe it, just because that front court, it's going to be a struggle. They're going to have to get more from that. There's just no way they can sustain if they don't. I mean, look at this. Kansas struggled, and Hunter Dickinson just got whatever he wanted. I understand that Hunter Dickinson's one of the best, but they're also going to play a lot of really good bigs outside of Hunter Dickinson. So some negatives there that I think should be a real level of concern for Michigan State moving forward. Now, we move into the night game, where Kentucky really surprised me. I thought at certain points during that game, when Duke went up, when they started to get things going, I thought this Kentucky team is just probably not going to have enough. And they would fight back, and they would fight back. There's one thing about this team that I already can notice, can tell, is they are playing for each other. I don't know about everyone else, and I've talked to a couple of people about this, particularly people around the Kentucky program, people who follow that team. about when I hear Mark Pope talk. I find myself rolling my eyes, might be a little bit extreme, but when he talks about the unity, playing for the front of the jersey, playing for your teammate, if it's ever about you, then that means that something has gone wrong. All of these things. It has nothing to do with Mark Pope, my reaction. But I start to tune it out just a little bit. And I'm catching myself now to where I'm realizing, wait a second, that's not John Calipari talking. Because John Calipari, he was a salesman. And there were times, especially the last couple of years, where what he would say to the Kentucky fan base just didn't match up all the time with what was out on the floor. And we know that just based off of what has transpired over the offseason, I'm not going to get into, specifics of anything, but it wasn't always just the front of the jersey. There was plenty of play for the back of the jersey at Kentucky. That's not the case this year, and it's a little bit jarring. You have to adjust to it. You have to reset everything you think about the Kentucky program. There are no one and dones on this team. It's largely built on fifth, sixth year transfers. Guys who have either tested the NBA waters and come back or have never even made it that far in the process. So it's a completely new Kentucky program, and we have to wipe the slate on how we judge this team because of that. That said, very impressed with the offense. We know that Mark Pope runs a pretty offense. I thought defensively, there were some good things. He went out and got some real defenders, and so far, it's plugged and played pretty well. I can't deny that. I think that Andrew Carr, they've got something there for sure. At least in the college game, he's going to be a good player. I really like Amari Williams the more that I watch him. I think that their depth in the front court was really solid as well. Guys who can come in, give you just a few minutes here and there to spell those two in particular. And then on the perimeter, Otega Owe, I'm a big fan of, have been for the last couple of years. Lamont Butler is just a proven winner in college basketball. Kerr Kriisa, look, love him, hate him. Everyone has an opinion on Kerr Kriisa, and that's part of his draw. But I can only assume if he's part of this Kentucky program and getting those minutes in that respect from Mark Pope, that he is bought in to this team aspect and what it means for Pope to talk about putting on that Kentucky jersey. On the other side, though, Duke, I saw a lot of things that I liked. I know Cone Knuppel didn't have his best night offensively. I really liked what Malawak gave them at that center position. He's a guy who I've been maybe a little critical of, a little skeptical of what his immediate impact was going to be at Duke this season. But contrary to some of the things that you would hear throughout the summer or what people would say about his readiness for the college game, he has come out and looks like a real defensive difference maker. Now, the cramping apparently is an issue at Duke nowadays. Cooper Flagg dealt with it. Of course, that drew parallels to Paolo Banchero. Malawak deals with it in this game. So, look, I think that's something that the trainers will discuss. How much of a real issue it is, I don't really know. That's one of those really hard ones to tell whether it means anything or not. And the last time it happened with Paolo, it was resolved after a couple of weeks. It kind of just went away. Maybe a conditioning thing, maybe a hydration thing, whatever the case is, I think it'll get resolved pretty quickly here for Duke. But we have to talk about Cooper Flagg because he came out, had a fantastic performance, a double-double. He had blocks, he had steals, over 20 points on the night. Again, did not shoot the ball well, but I want to break down first the positives, and then we'll get into the negatives, and then the end of the game for Cooper Flagg, because I think we have to take a little bit of a deep dive here on the assumed #1 overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. First off, the positives, he looked the part. He looked the part throughout that game. One turnover in the first 38 minutes. Although he wasn't getting everything he wanted, he was still efficient in the way that he was doing it. He knew when to pass. He knew when to shoot. And I thought largely made good decisions. And you saw the points. They start to rack up. They start to rack up. I thought what he did as well as anything is casually get to 20 points. There wasn't a lot of strain in the way that he was playing the game. It was finding his spot. It was running the offense. He was just getting there and playing better than the guy guarding him. And we just talked about Kentucky. They've got good defenders. So I thought that it was a really good night to watch him on offense and say, yeah, like he's got it. He's got the shot. He's got the fluidity, the understanding, that IQ. He's got everything it takes on the offensive end. And then on the defensive end, we saw it, that athleticism, the block shots, the steals, his ability to close space, all of it. He makes a major impact on the game, on defense. Sometimes when I don't think the other team is really expecting as much. I'm not going to call him a sneaky athlete. Don't even think I'm going to. He is a proven athlete, an incredible athlete. But I think that sometimes it's easier for him to get out there than anyone would expect. I mean, look, I don't want to make this direct comparison because Zion is a more explosive athlete. Cooper does it in a more fluid way. But there was something about Zion that you knew he was a freak athlete, but you'd still shoot it and then be surprised when he blocked the shot. I think Cooper has that in a different way. Where Zion, it was just the pure power to get up and block the shot. Cooper, I think, has a lot more understanding of when to go, of the position to arrive at, those type of things. And you couple that with being such a good athlete, and he's able to get a lot of these blocks, these steals, these deflections that he's able to achieve throughout the game. Now, the negatives that I saw throughout the game, first is that three-point shot is not his best attribute. That's something that will take time for him to develop. I still do not like the shot form. I know that it has been repeatable to this point. There has not been. I think I have more concern over the three-point shot than a lot of people. And I can't tell you exactly why that is. I know the reason that I have a little bit more concern is because it's not your traditional jump shot. And that's not to say it can't go in. Look, Tyrese Halliburton has a very unconventional jump shot. If you look at the base mechanics, it's still okay. I still never liked it. I never had him rated high at all. And look, he's continued. It's been a repeatable shot for him at the next level. Other guys, though, have not been able to achieve that, and it has set them back. So when we talk about setting Cooper back, like LeBron was not a great three-point shooter until later into his career. Kawhi Leonard improved as a three-point shooter throughout his career. A lot of these guys who play this wing position, this 3-4 combo, who are stars, they grow in their ability to shoot the ball throughout their careers. So it's something that definitely can happen. I just, you would like to see it a little bit more now. And that's not to say it won't turn on and start falling at a higher rate throughout the course of this season. There are ebbs and flows to shooting percentages. The other thing, and this will lead us into the final point on Cooper, is his handle is too loose. I know we're going to talk about the end of game sequence, but outside of that, multiple times, if you go back and watch the tape, watch him just coming up the floor, like crossing half court, sometimes he loses track of the ball. And it didn't cost him any turnovers because he's in open space and he's kind of just on his own, dribbling, setting up the offense. But it happened at least twice that I can remember where he's just dribbling forward. And whether he's looking and trying to process the offense or read the defense or a combination of both, or if it's just a ball handling issue, I don't know to what degree each of those is contributing. But he would just kind of lose it he would not get it. The ball would not come straight into his palm to go back down again. On his little turn, he likes to do this kind of spin move backwards out of, a drive. The ball's too far out. And that's where you saw at the end of the game, Kentucky capitalize. They saw it. And that one was particularly a loose dribble. And it got well out there, and they were able to come in and force the turnover. And then, of course, on the baseline, he slips and you go down. He was pressing there. That was maybe the one point in the game he looked like he was pressing. And I think he was trying so hard to make up for that last one that he compounded it. And that's something that you grow from, you learn from. He's 17. I think he'll resolve that one pretty quickly. But he's got to stay in the gym. He's got to keep working on that handle because that loose handle is only going to be a bigger issue the higher level of competition that he plays. Of course, Kentucky, some of the best defenders in college basketball, but you talk about getting that on tape, teams start jumping it. And then, of course, next year, the goal is to dominate the NBA. And we've seen him, he performs with Team USA. He goes in and works out with those guys, and they all rave about him. I don't know this for sure, but I don't assume that he was on the ball a whole lot. And so that weakness probably wouldn't have shown during that time in that camp. So those are the two things that I really want to see Flagg work on between now and the draft. I want to see those improvements by the time we get to March. And I'm sure that we will because his game is extremely well-rounded for his age. And that's why he is the presumptive number one pick in next year's draft. When we come back on the other side, we will be talking about Ryan Kalkbrenner, his dominant performance to this point in the season right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values as we roll through into this second segment where we're talking about Ryan Kalkbrenner, his big performances to start the season. Sure, they have not been against the biggest teams in the country, but they've been big performances nonetheless. Started out with Rio Grande Valley, then Fairleigh Dickinson, and Houston Christian. Those are the first 3 games that Creighton has played, obviously 3-0 to this point. No real challenge in any of those games. They've kind of run away with it in all of those. But the story has been Ryan Kalkbrenner. In their first game of the season, he plays 36 minutes, goes 20 of 22 from the field, including 2 for 2 from 3, for a 49-11 performance. One of the great games that we're going to see. I mean, a real game of the year candidate by Ryan Kalkbrenner in the early days of the season, just 1 week into college basketball. He already was in that type of conversation. And then he follows it up again against low competition. I get it. But he follows it up with a 24-point performance on 9 of 10 shooting, including 1 of 1 from 3. So now he's shooting 100% from 3, 3 for 3 from deep, as a 7-foot big who's known for his defense. I mean, he is a defensive player of the year type player. I think one of the frontrunners, if not the frontrunner for that award already coming into the season. And now he puts up 24 points in 22 minutes, 1 game after doing 49 points in 36 minutes. So points per minute, he is off the charts. Unbelievable. And he's already the talk of college basketball after those 2 games. I mean, averaging over 30 points per game and just incredible. Also averaging 3 blocks per game along the way. Well, then he follows it up on Wednesday with 16 points. So, I mean, look, his scoring has fallen off a cliff from the 49 points, but it was on 6 of 6 shooting from the field. So, that means he is now shooting 35 of 38 from the field in 3 games. Well over 90%. Unbelievable. Like, incredible offensive output from this guy who, again, is known as a defensive player. He's a guy who averaged 13 points a game throughout his college career to this point. A guy who could have looked at some of the NBA draft, maybe would have gotten on a two-way, potentially picked late in that second round. Somebody that there's interest in because of that defensive talent. But now to come out and through the first 3 games average 30 points per game while shooting well over 90% from the field. He is not only cementing himself as a guy that NBA scouts are going to watch night in and night out when he's on the floor, he should be the front runner for National Player of the Year. These are the type of numbers that over the last 2 years we have only seen put up by one person. And his name was Zach Edey, the 2-time National Player of the Year. One of the few people to ever win it back to back. And now we're seeing Ryan Kalkbrenner step straight into that space. And no, the dominance on offense is not there. While he has put up huge numbers, again, it's low level of competition. But I think when you pair a guy who is averaging 30 points per game with the defensive impact that he has, I don't see how anyone, if he remains on this pace, and it's a tall task. I'm not saying he shoots 91% from the field. I'm not saying he shoots 100% from 3, obviously. But I don't think that he's particularly maxed out his output. I mean, 22 minutes per game, in the last 2 games, because they've been up by so much. So while, yes, he's going to face higher competition, I think even if that shooting percentage comes down to 67, 70%, 65 if he's taking a few more threes, if he can dominate at that level, I think the scoring output stays in those high 20s. He could be a 25 point per game performer this year. There's no reason he couldn't be. And so if he's able to put that together, I just don't see how any of these other players could contend with what he's doing, because you're talking about the other main contenders. Look at Mark Sears, who doesn't have the defensive impact. And as a guard, he's not going to put up the type of efficiency numbers. The PER is never going to be as high for a guard as it is for a guy on the interior. And then Hunter Dickinson, not a defensive juggernaut. So even if he puts up the offensive output, he's not going to have the defensive to hang with Ryan Kalkbrenner's case. So I'm not saying he will. I'm saying right now he's on pace to. And he has shown everything to tell you that he can be the National Player of the Year. Ryan Kalkbrenner doing outstanding things, will be a player who we are watching throughout the season for sure. Already was going to be on that radar. Don't get it twisted. But now even more so with the way he is playing right now. And a guy who, as I mentioned, how Zach Edey dominated. Well, Zach Edey also came back, worked on his game, showed that he had more to it, ended up a top 10 draft pick. So Ryan Kalkbrenner, a guy who had NBA interest for what he can do defensively, if he is an incredible offensive weapon as well, that's something the teams are going to seriously take note of. When we come back on the other side, we'll get you out of here with the games of the week right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back as we wrap up this week's episode here on 3 True Values. We're going to get you out of here with the games of the week. Starting out tonight on Thursday, we've got Grand Canyon against Arizona State. A good chance to watch this GCU team under Bryce Drew, which probably not going to watch a ton in conference play, so we want to get a look at them against a high major team here, Bobby Hurley's squad, which has had a little bit of up and down to this point so far. Then we're going to watch Ohio State and Texas A&M on Friday. That's now a ranked matchup and one that I think will be interesting because Ohio State, they pull off a big win against Texas to start their season under Jake Diebler. Texas A&M, he suffered an upset loss to start their season, fell down in the polls quite a bit. They're now 2-1, but a good chance for them to kind of help boost their resume back to where it should be if they can come away with that one. Then on Saturday, we've got Ole Miss against Colorado State. That's Chris Beard versus Nico Medved. That is a good coaching matchup. And then Colorado State, while Ole Miss is a team that we expect their top 25 level team to be in the tournament for sure, Colorado State could be one of those teams hovering around the bubble early on in the process, and we'll see which way things go for that group as the Mountain West has to show, once again, like they did last year, how strong that conference is from top to bottom. Then on Sunday, now this is a fun one. This is one you're going to want to tune in for. I know it's Sunday, you got other things going on, but St. John's is playing New Mexico. This is Rick Pitino versus Richard Pitino. In case you were unaware, the father-son coaching battle, it doesn't get much better than that. And two programs that they have kind of built up. Rick, of course, went to St. John's with the idea of building them into a top 25 level program, and here they are. They have now made it. They are in that conversation this season. And then New Mexico, a team that Richard Pitino took over after leaving Minnesota. And he is really, we talk about the strength of Mountain West last year. New Mexico was a huge part of that. And he has built a program there. Repeated success. They've got guys who have stayed in that system. So a really good story and a good matchup. Both there on Sunday for you to watch. And then on Monday, we're going to go Gonzaga against San Diego State. So apparently, this week is for scouting out the Mountain West Conference. That's what we've decided. Apparently here, just the West Coast in general, because we got Grand Canyon and Arizona State on Thursday. So yeah, we're going to get a good understanding of the West Coast and what it looks like this week as we roll through things. But then we're going to head back to the Midwest on Tuesday because we have Purdue against Marquette, two really good Midwestern teams there. Purdue, a chance to show what they got. I have kind of doubted them. Can they really be so good without Zach Edey? Well, here's your chance to prove it. Marquette, a team also looking to kind of prove some things. They're without Kolek now. They're without Oso Ighodaro. Can David Joplin step up? Cam Jones is the go-to guy now. Ben Gold. What else do they have? Is it enough to warrant the rating that they have? And then on Wednesday, we'll wrap up the week with Alabama against Illinois. Illinois, I think, the probably most underrated team right now. They're still outside the top 25 to start, despite starting the season undefeated. Alabama, number 2 in the country, and really right on Kansas's tail at this point in the season. That wraps us up for today. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more right here on 3 True Values.